Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at the Rock Island Auction Company taking a look at some of the guns they're going to be selling in their upcoming May of 2019 premiere auction. And today we have kind of a runner-up in the Old West Revolver game. This is a Forehand and Wadsworth Old Army model cartridge revolver. Now, a little bit of background here on the company. This Forehand and Wadsworth evolved out of Allen and Wheelock, and that was run primarily by Ethan Allen, who was a really quite famous American gunsmith, not related to the Ethan Allen of American Revolutionary War fame. And then Sullivan Forehand and Henry Wadsworth were both his sons-in-law. Each of them ended up actually marrying one of Ethan Allen's daughters, and Wheelock died in 1863, at which point the company became Ethan Allen and Company, and both of those sons-in-law, Forehand and Wadsworth, were brought in as partners in the company, and it would stay that way until 1871 when Ethan Allen himself died, at which point the company became Forehand and Wadsworth, and that's the company that actually produced this. Now, Forehand and Wadsworth would make quite a huge number, actually, of pocket revolvers. That was really their bread and butter, 32s and 38 caliber revolvers. And while they look very similar to a lot of the kind of junk suicide special 32 and 38 caliber revolvers that were out there in the late 1800s, they're actually pretty good guns. They're a step above where a lot of people put them. They're not quite as good as a Colt or a Smith & Wesson, but they're the next level. Now, in 1873, Forehand and Wadsworth decided to try their hand with a full-size revolver. Instead of just another pocket concealed carry type thing, they wanted to go with the full-on military pattern, 44 caliber, big bore, long barrel service revolver. And so they introduced their Army model, which we have here. You'll note that they introduced it in 1873. There was another revolver of some note you might think of that was introduced in 1873. That would be the Colt Peacemaker. And Forehand and Wadsworth were a pretty good company, but they had a very hard time competing with the Colt 1873 and the Smith & Wesson revolvers. So let's take a look at this, show you exactly how it works, and then we'll talk about what ended up happening to them. This is a pretty big, chunky revolver. Definitely a full-size gun, 7.5-inch barrel, 2.5 pounds overall unloaded weight. It is a 6-shot. There you go, 6-shot, 44 caliber, specifically 44 Smith & Wesson Russian. The grip style actually reminds me quite a lot of the Merwin Hulbert and Company revolvers. Not their bird's head grip, but their standard grip. Definitely quite distinct from Colt's plow handle grip. I find this relatively comfortable, however. It is single action only, so cock and fire. We have a loading gate here on the right side. In order to load it, pull the hammer back just slightly to the safety notch. That allows the cylinder to spin freely. You can load each cartridge in sequence. Cock the rest of the way. That locks the cylinder up, and then it's ready to fire. To eject, you have an ejector rod under the barrel. You push this little lever forward right there, and then you can pull the ejector rod out and then pivot it up, leaving the gate open to get cases out, and you can then punch out each individual case like so. This ejector rod is definitely one of the weaker points of the gun. It is blatantly copied from Webley, whose revolvers Forehand and Wadsworth basically copied and sold on the market as part of their catalog. Sights are fairly typical of the period. We have a half-circular front sight there pinned in place, and then our rear sight is a notch. That's a little bit of a deeper V than you'd normally see, but not fundamentally different. And we can take the cylinder out fairly easily by pulling the ejector rod out of the way, and then we can push this lever in, pull out the cylinder access pin, and then when you open up the loading gate, the cylinder comes out. Serial number on this example is 214, and that is actually repeated on the rear face of the cylinder there, 214. The other markings on the gun are on the top of the barrel rib, Forehand Wadsworth, Worcester, Massachusetts, and a couple of US patent dates, an early 1861 patent that covered some of the general revolver features of, well, what would have then been the Allen Wheelock guns, and then 1871 and 1873 were a couple of additional patents that were acquired or registered by Forehand Wadsworth pertaining to this specific gun. I was going to take the side plate off to show you guys the internals, but this one's stuck on there pretty tight, and I'm not exactly sure why, and I don't want to go messing with it too much, since this isn't actually my gun. In total, less than 1,000 of these were made. The problem was simply that they just couldn't compete with Colt or Smith & Wesson. This ejector rod in particular is kind of a weak point compared to the fixed spring-loaded ejector rod of the Colt, or certainly compared to the simultaneous ejection system of the top-break Smith & Wesson. And just overall, you know, this is kind of the second tier of quality, and if the price isn't a lot better, which it wasn't, why would you get one of these instead of being able to get a Colt or a Smith & Wesson? That really was the thing that prevented these from seeing any wider manufacture or service. Now, they did come out with an improved version in 1878. That one was chambered for the 4440 or 44 Winchester centerfire cartridge, which was a nice idea, but it was not enough to salvage these guns. And before long after that, they were out of production. So ultimately, the company was sold to Hopkins and Allen in 1902. That was the end of Forehand and Wadsworth. So, these are, given less than 1,000 made, not a huge number of them surviving. These are a pretty cool, rare service caliber revolver to find from the Old West period, and a really neat one. So if you're interested in adding this guy to your own collection, it is coming up for sale at the Rock Island Auction Company. Check out their catalog for pictures and details on this and everything else that they have coming up. Thanks for watching.